The Gemara on Rosh Hashanah Tet Zayin brings down Be'arba'a Perakim Nidon Ha'olam. Then 4 times in the world is judged. Be'Pesach ala Tevu'ah. On Pesach, on the crops, on the grains, on how the plants are going to be doing. And Masechet Berachot Daf Daled, it says, Kol ha'omer tehila leDavid shalosh pe'amim bayom uftach lo shehu ben olam haba. That if a person says this tehila leDavid 3 times a day, guaranteed he's going to go to olam haba. And the Shulchan Aruch brings down in Or HaHayim Nun Aleph Dash Zayin, Sarich lekaven bepasuk poteach et yadecha ve'im lo kiven sarich lachzor lomro pa'am achat. He tells you that when you say this Tehillah David, when you say Potech et Yadecha, you have to have kavanah. You need to know what you're saying. You need to know what the English or whatever language you speak interpretation of the word is. And in short, it's that all sustenance that exists on earth and everywhere comes from the Borei Olam. And the Potech et Yadecha has many different kavanot. One of them is if you take the Rashi Tevot, which is the first 3 letters of the words Potech et Yadecha, the first letters Pei, Aleph, Yud, and then the last letters of Poteach et Yadecha, which is a Het, a Tav, and a Chaf, that spells you the name Chatach. And then you do the Atbash of those letters. What's Atbash? Atbash is when you switch the letters with the other corresponding letter in the Hebrew alphabet. So Atbash, so Aleph would switch with Tav, Bet with Shin, and then Gar, Dak, and then it continues that way. So when you do Chatach, you get the letters Samech, Aleph, Lamed. So again, Poteach et Yadecha starts with Pei, Aleph, Yud. The last letters, Sofei Tevot, Chet, Tav, Chaf. And then you have the Atbash with Samech, Aleph, and Lamed. And that spells for you Pesach, Pei, Aleph, Yud, the Chatach, and the Samech, Aleph, and Lamed. And Pesach, because Pesach is the Ikar of the Parnasah, of the Shefa. That's where the source comes of the Tevu'ah. That's where it's Nidon. And there's many segulot that come down in Pesach in order to bring beracha and parnasat tova. Their Sefer Hamidot of Rabbi Nachman and Breslov brings down that the maror is actually one of the sources of parnasah and bringing shefa. The Sefer Taleh Hayim the Halban, Rabbi Hayim Kohen, he has many segulot that he brings down that a person can do. And in the month of Nissan, the configuration of the name of God for this month is Yud Kei Vav Kei. What does that mean? There are 12 months of the year, and the name of God, the tetragrammaton that they call, is Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Yud Kei Vav Kei can be configured 12 different ways. Why? Because you have 2 Heys, 1 Yud and 1 Vav. So 3 letters can be configured in 12 different ways when it has 2 Heys. And the month of Nisan, being the first month, gets the name of God in its standard, normal format that it's spelled, Yud Kei Vav Kei. All the other months have different tzirufim, different configurations for the name of the month. And when a person says the Musaf on Rosh Chodesh, the Kavanah, in the Beracha, Baruch Atah Hashem, in the name, when you say Hashem's name, you should think of the way that tziruf, the configuration of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, is for the month. When you say Baruch Mekadesh Yisrael Berashei Chodashim, you say that whole pasuk. That's when you would have the kavanah. And if you look at some of the sidurim, like Avodat HaKodesh and a few others, they started to put that in. So you can do it. There's a name for Havaya, and there's also a name for Eheyeh, but we're going to only talk about the Havaya one. And so for Nisan, the configuration is Yud Kei Vav Kei, which stands for the pasuk Yismechu Hashamayim v'Tagel Haaretz. The heavens should be happy, and so should the earth. Why is that pasuk? Well, remember I told you that Kol Ha'olam Nidon Ba'arba Pe'amim and Pesach ala Tevu'ah. Tevu'ah is crops. Crops come from Tagel Haaretz. You need the land to be happy. The land is happy when Yismechu Hashamayim, when the heavens bring down happy, good rain. So the good rain of the Shamayim makes the Haaretz. That's the month, the Chag HaAviv, Chodesh HaAviv, that we want to see it. And all the other months are different. None of the other months will have that same exact configuration. There's a sefer called Botzina Din Hora. It's Rabbi Baruch Memezhebush. And he brings down that in the month of Nisan, you have to worship the Borei Olam and God be'ahava, with love. What does that mean? You're worshiping Him out of love, as opposed to Tishre, In Tishri, when we oved God through yir'ah, through fear, where we know there's a judgment and you go in with fear. On the month of Nissan, we go in with ahava. And the month of Tishre, the yir'ah, is sometimes called in some of the Sfarim nukba. Nukba from the word nekeva, female. A female is from the judgment. And while the gever is a hamim, a man is a hamim. And so you have this nukba. Now, it says in Parashat Bo, ve'avata et ha'avodah hazot b'chodesh hazeh. Ha'avodah hazot, this avodah will be in Tishre, while ha'chodesh hazeh will be ha'chodesh hazeh, lachem rosh chodashim, is the other month. And he connects the 2 months. That's how he does it, from in Botzina Din Hora. There was a rabbi called the Tzemach Sadik. He was the rabbi of Vizhnitz. And whenever he would do the Seder, when they lifted the Ke'ara and they move it to another room, in order so the kids could ask questions, he would lift it would be Magbiya, and he would say, Shum'im kol shofar. So every year they would lift the Ke'ara, he would say, Shum'im kol shofar. And so they asked his grandson, the Ahavat Yisrael, they asked him, what does that mean? And he would just tell them, listen, lo kol ha'ke'arot shavot, ve'lo kol ha'uznaim shavot. He said, listen, not every Ke'ara is the same Ke'ara, not every ear is the same ear. So just because you have a Ke'ara doesn't mean you heard the kol shofar, and whatever. So, but what did he mean? What did the Sadiq, here, the Tzemach Sadiq, what did he tell us here? That Shum'im kol shofar when you raise the Ke'ara. So what he was saying is, if you take the Ke'ara and you raise it, meaning go up one letter of the word Ke'ara, take the Kuf. What's the word after Kuf? The letter after Kuf is a Resh. Of the Ayin, the letter after is a Pei, the Resh afterward is a Shin, and the He afterward is a Vav. So if you raise the letters of Ke'ara, you have Shofar. And he was connecting that the Ke'ara is the tool in which we worship the Borei Olam in Nissan, and we'll go into a little bit of what the Ke'ara is, and why is it just more than just a plate, while the Shofar is for Nissan. And you see these connections of Tishrei and Nissan a lot, and they are very, you have the Rosh Hashanah, for the Melachim, the Hodashim, and the Shtarot for Nissan, while you have the Shemitot and the Yovlot when it came to Tishre. And the argument is a big one. The Matai Nivra Ha'olam. When was the world created? Was the world created? It's Rosh Hashanah Yud Aleph. Rabbi Eliezer says Nissan. And then you have Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Eliezer says Tishre, and Rabbi Yoshua says Nissan. And so what's going on here? You have, again, the month of Tishre and the month of Nissan. And the Shulchan Aruch and Orach Chaim Taf Kuf Pei Gimel, he brings down the Haggah, Yesh Medachtekim, Shelo Le'echol Egozim, She'egoz Begimatria Chet. And in Tishre, the Shulchan Aruch and the Haggah and the Ramah tells us, you don't have Egozim. While in Pesachim, Kuftet, it says, Amru al Rabbi Akiva, She'aya Mechalek Kelayot Ve'egozim, he would give out for the children Egozim. So in the month of Tishre, you had Egozim, but we don't want to see them. We don't want to know about your Egozim in Tishre. When it came to Nissan, you kept them. So the short meaning, the short explanation, the pshat, is that the children liked walnuts. They were fun, I guess. They used to come in this big shell, and you had to crack them, and you had to break them with a hammer, and you had to kick them out. So they liked it. They played with it. While at the same time, in Tishrei, where there's a lot of prayers, a lot of reading, a lot of words, eating nuts and shelled walnuts, could leave something in the throat. It's sometimes not easy to read. And in the month of Tishrei, we don't want people wasting time. We want you reading Tehillim, learning Tefillot. And so for that, they tell you this and don't do it. And in short, the esoteric reason is they tell you, okay, it goes, if you take the numerical value, it equals the word het, sin. So we don't want to remind you of a sin. So if you see the word, you see an egoz, you could be reminded of sin. It could put you in the wrong zone. So don't do it. But let's go further into it. In Tishri, we do Teshuva from Yir'ah, while in Nissan we do Teshuva from Ahava. And it says in Yoma Peivav, Amar Reish Lakish, Gedula Teshuva shezedonot na'asot lo shegagot, that the avonot that a person does when he does Teshuva in Tishri, those avonot, those zedonot, the ones on purpose, they become shegagot. Now, when it says avonot on purpose become shegagot, it's also talking about shegagot that are considered avonot, that are considered mezid. What that means that if a person does an avera bishkaga multiple times with knowledge that's not allowed, it becomes a zadon. And so with this Teshuva, he's telling you the avonot that were zadon on purpose, they became shegagot. That's in Tishre. While Teshuva from Ira'ah, the avonot, what happens to them? They become zechuyot. They become meritorious deeds. They become a merit to you. And so when it comes to the holiday of Nissan, we tell you, where are those egozim? Give me those egozim, because now that we're doing Teshuvah from Yirah, we're going to convert those hata'im, which were originally zedonot that became shgagot. Now we're saying, give us back to us. We're going to take them and we're going to make them into zechuyot, into meritorious deeds. And this is why you'll see egozim come up also in the haroset. Why do you keep bringing egozim in? Because we want to take those, and the connection goes even further, because during Tishre, after the zedonot become shgagot, what do? We go to the water and we release it with tashlich. And through the tashlich, we're able to release all the avonot. While when it comes to the month of Nisan, we have ma'im shelanu. We have the bringing up the water and gathering it back, like it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, Tav, Nun, Hey, that we gather the water. So you could see that there are two connections between the 2 months, while you have one Teshuvah from Yir'ah and the month of Nisan, the Teshuvah of Ahava. And I think this ties into a little bit of a deeper issue. It says on the holiday, that a person has to see himself like he left Egypt. And, Rabbi Zev brought this when he spoke in Sinai in Daba. What does that even mean? What do you mean, that you have to see yourself like you left Egypt? How? There's no slaves around today, no servants. How is a person going to assume himself like does he even understand what that is, what slavery really means? Of course, you could read about it in the books, you could hear about it, you could hear stories, but to actually know and understand a person, to see himself that way, that he left Egypt, I think that's it's very, very hard. But I think that the answer lies in the way Hazal told us what to do. It says, it says a person is required to see that he left Egypt. It didn't say like he left the land of Egypt. Tell him like he left from Mitzrayim. What does that mean? So if you look at Mitzrayim, the way it's spelled, it's a mem. There's a standard mem in the beginning of Mitzrayim, and at the end they have a mem sofit. It's all closed. So it's all closed on one side, and it's a little bit open on the bottom. And that's how it looks like in life sometimes. Sometimes things are closed. You don't have an answer. And who's in the middle of these two mems is the Yetzir. It's the Yetzir. It's the difficulty of the Yetzir. And a lot of times, a person has difficulty, and he's able to get through them. And by getting through them, and by solving those problems, that's also Yetziat Mitzrayim. It's not Yetziat Eretz Mitzrayim, but it's a Yetziat Mitzrayim. And that brings Emunah and Bitachon. And you should not underestimate that, because every morning when we say Birkot HaShachar, we say Shelo Asani Avid, that a person was not made into a slave. And slavery exists. It exists not in the realm of the way that we may have thought it before Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves in the 1860s, but a slavery of doing things that you truly don't want to do. And I want to tie this into the technology aspect of the internet and what it has done. Being someone that was born in the 80s, I remember what it was like before, what has happened, how great it's been, the communication, the networking, the meetings, the knowledge, the information. There's so many great things that have come through the internet. But the internet has also made us slaves. And it's made us slaves to the devices, the phones. It's made us slaves to the internet itself. It's dumbed down an entire generation, at least here around me here in the United States, where people don't know things. They have to look things up, even basic things. Knowledge is slipping away, and people are becoming servants to the device and becoming slaves to the device. I know myself. I know sometimes I go on to do something simple, and the next thing you know, it's 40 minutes and gone. What would happen? And this type of slavery is a real one. I always think about the way people survived before this. I remember printing out MapQuest directions when I had to get to a destination. Now it's super simple, much easier. I got to tell you, it is easier. And there were a lot more fears growing up, like where things were or how to get there. Now it's much easier. But this ease of comfort has also taken away a tremendous, tremendous amount of what we call peace of mind, minuchat hanefesh. And when Pesach comes around and Shabbat and Yom Tov, and we don't use these devices, of course, I think it's also a time to think about whether or not you want this type of slavery. You know, in the Haredi world, in the right wing Orthodox world, they're into the flip phones. But I always joke around about behind every flip phone is a smartphone. Because of course, it's someone with an internet. That was the big joke about the Gedolim. A lot of times, I drove many Gedolim, and I always wondered, like, how did they communicate with everyone? They just got a flip phone, and you never see him on his phone anyway. But I always said behind every gadol is a gabbai. Behind every gadol with a flip phone is a gabbai with a smartphone. And it was true. It was all the time. It's just, unfortunately, that's just the reality. But going back to it, this internet has become absolutely chains around everybody. And I think that in Pesach, a person has to look at how much he's chained down to this internet, to these devices, to these phones. Person misses his phone, suddenly he starts to look around himself, he starts to feel what's going on. Person losing his phone, it's a catastrophe. You kind of hear it and see the story sometimes, but I think this is the slavery, and this is the Mitzrayim, and I think that the Borei Olam was telling you at the end of time, there's going to be a real Mitzrayim like this, and a person's going to think to himself, how can you get out of it? How could you live this way? You can live like the Amish? Yeah, maybe to some capacity. And I think this is why the Borei Olam left us the Amish people. I think that there's so much that we could learn from them. You have to ask yourself, why does the Borei Olam leave groups of people like this around for the world to see and observe? And I think that it's to allow us the glimpse of how great these people are, and that they kept their culture. They kept everything the same, the simplicity, and you can go see it. And a lot of people today, they want to go back to that simplicity because they realize this is all a game. And I think 25 years from 2000 till now, 2025, where people were able to really get a glimpse of how great this internet, how much good and everything. They're also able to see, like, it's useful, needed, but this can't be the core of the life, because then it takes over. And then a person becomes a servant to it and becomes a slave. And he's not, physically a slave, but he is a slave. And he suddenly opens his phone 700 times a day. And, he looks at the end of the week. He's got 30 hours on the phone. He's got a full day. Where is this time? Where did the time go? That's the slavery. And I think that if we can focus and hone in on it, and be honest, and I think being honest is the key here, because I think when I presented this argument, some people have said, yeah, that's great. I know. I'm a businessman. I understand that component of it, but I think that we also have to agree that it's making everyone slaves and putting chains around them. And this is from the avdut, the herut. The person should be able to disconnect himself from the internet, from technology, and to be able to learn with minuchat hanefesh, to be able to pray with minuchat hanefesh, and not to have to think about so many things. These things take time, practice, and some of the ways that a person can do it is first identifying who is the slave, and to admitting it. What is the slavery? What's being done specifically? Identify yourself as being free, that you are free and can be free and will be free, and then act in that way. And through good habits, a person can be matzliach. Baruch Adonai, Amen.